Well, just on the shutdown, I've been very curious to watch how this shutdown has played, because normally these things go very well for the Democrats, but I was very interested to see what Frank Luntz had to say on CNN. Have a look at this.
Everyone is being hurt by this. Everyone's credibility and respect, and looking at the government, and the public just looks at this and says, why? Why can't you find some agreement? Why can't you give? Why can't you cooperate? It is hurting the Republicans, but it seems to be hurting the Democrats even more.
And this week we are going to have air traffic control dialed back by 10%, air flights dialed back by 10% at major airports. This is really going to start to bite once you start to cut flights and things like that. People are going to feel this now.
They are. Frank is a good friend, has been for a long time, and he and I have had this conversation many times. He's right, but he's not exactly right. He says the public is upset, and that's true, but the public doesn't vote. Keep in mind, the turnout here was extraordinarily low. So a lot of the people that Frank is talking to say that you don't like either party, they're upset with the way Washington is being run. Those generally are not the people that show up in these off-year elections. It's the base that votes, the really hardcore right and the hardcore left. It's sort of in that sense, then, James, like a primary election. Not exactly the same, but it sort of trends that way. And I got to tell you, the Democrats think they're winning the shutdown. Republicans think they're winning the shutdown. That's why I just don't think the shutdown, to counter to what Frank would suggest, had much of anything to do with his outcome here.
Yeah, no, I think you're probably right there. But just, moving forward with the shutdown, you've got other issues as well. You've got the filibuster and the people saying that maybe Donald Trump should end this filibuster rule around, the vote to get the government moving again. Explain to our friends here in Australia who may not be across the ins and outs what this word means and why it's so important for getting the government funded again.
Yeah, it's important for a lot of different things. It's essentially a rule that requires any piece of legislation, with certain exceptions, any piece of legislation in the Senate to obtain 60 votes. So unless a party has 60 votes, it means that anything coming out of the Senate needs to be bipartisan. It's not constitutional, by the way. In fact, it's not even that old. The current filibuster rule was created in the 1970s. It used to be that a senator had to talk in order to filibuster or prevent a vote. That's the old movie, if you're familiar with it, down there called Mr. Smith Goes to Washington with Jimmy Stewart. But that rule changed in the 1970s, and essentially senators can now just tell everybody that they would talk about it. That constitutes a filibuster, and it essentially means that every vote needs 60 votes. Trump doesn't like it. I don't like it. There's a lot of folks in the Senate who do like it. Here's the critical part, though, James. To your point, Trump can't change it. Trump cannot change it. He has no authority whatsoever to change it. This is an internal rule of the Senate. The Senate itself has to agree to change this. And we tried to put pressure on them in the first term to get the filibuster to allow us to redo Obamacare. We've tried again now to try to allow us to reopen the government. And the Senate, in many ways, cares a lot more about that filibuster than a lot of other things. So I don't think the filibuster rule is going to change. And it's certainly not going to solve the problem we have today with the shutdown.
But strategically speaking, though, I mean, there could be some time in the future when the Democrats have a small majority in the Senate. And if you got rid of that rule now, then Republicans would lose a big handbrake in the future on, whatever radical things they wanted to try.
Yeah, that's certainly the argument. And I can see that argument. My response to that, believe me, I've had this conversation when I was chief of staff with Mitch McConnell with dozens of Republican senators. They're like, look, Mick, we need this for the day the Democrats take over. I'm like, the day the Democrats take over, it strikes me that that's what the voters wanted. What you folks are really doing in the Senate is preventing the voters from having a say in how their country is run. They could elect 59 Republican senators and still not have the ability to pass legislation without having it be bipartisan. I'm not sure that's what the founders wanted. If the founders had wanted that, they would have put the filibuster rule in the Constitution, but they didn't. And again, there's other sort of breaks against an overreaching Senate, which would be to go back to that rule about just having the ability to speak a filibuster, to actually talk and stop things that way, as opposed to just putting your name on a piece of paper and going off to a fundraiser. Believe me, as a former member of the House of Representatives, I'm not a big fan of the filibuster, and I wish it would go away. But I think it's mostly academic at this point. There's no interest, I think, in the Senate right now to change the filibuster rules.
But, Mick, you may very well have changed my mind on the filibuster. It's so fascinating with U.S. politics how these debates can echo back for 250 years. Mick Mulvaney, thank you so much for your time, as always.
Thanks, James.